Welcome to the Shipping Podcast, where you meet interesting maritime professionals sharing their passion for the shipping industry and their everyday job. I am your host. My name is Lena Gothberg. Hello, Shipping Podcast listeners. I'm back. This is the 42nd episode of the Shipping Podcast. It's another one in the series of interviews I made when I was at the CMA in New York in March. So on the 22nd of March, I met with Esben Poulsson. At that time, he was one of the 4 vice chairmen of ICS, that is the International Chamber of Shipping. Since then, in June 2016, Esben was elected as the president of the board of ICS. ICS, International Chamber of Shipping, that is a trade organization for ship owners, where the members are national ship owners associations from 37 countries, representing all sectors and trades and about 80% of the world merchant fleet. Esben has been in shipping all his life. He was meant for shipping, his stepfather told him, as you will hear. However, Esben is rather new to the organization side of shipping. He's been in the business side all his life. But as he states in the interview, he realizes now the importance of showing real shipping people to the politicians and ministers in charge of the regulations that is put upon shipping as an industry. Esben has got another passion as well. He's a vivid sailor. And you will hear all about that in the interview. So, I won't hold you anymore. This is Esben Poulsson for you. Welcome to the Shipping Podcast.
Thank you.
Who are you?
My name is Esben Poulsson. I am originally I was born in Denmark with a Norwegian father, Danish mother. Emigrated to Canada as a 12-year-old and went to school and university there. And then entered the shipping business in Hong Kong in 1971.
How come?
It was a very strange story because I was actually going to join a local Vancouver company and it was all set up. And I'd been to Europe a few times. I'd worked on a ship as a 17-year-old from Canada to Australia. I sat in an office in London when the Suez Canal closed in a tanker broking office, which was fascinating because it was a historic event as far as shipping is concerned. And so I had the idea that I wanted to be in shipping, but I was going to just stay in Vancouver, which is, of course, a very nice place, until an old Norwegian captain said to me, operations department of the company I worked, said to me, Vancouver is a nice place, but it's a backwater in terms of shipping on a worldwide basis. It's an important port, but very little cargo is controlled there and very few ships are controlled there. And he said, you're an energetic young guy and you've got to get out in the world. So, and he then launched in my head the idea of Hong Kong, which I was totally fascinated about. And through a whole sequence of events, I was given a trainee job by a company called Volvo. It's still very much in existence today, ship management, broking, owning. And I joined them in 1971. And I basically stayed in Hong Kong I was supposed to have gone for 2 years and I stayed for 25. And then at the end of that, the company I worked for had been sold to the Danish ship owner TORM. And so that was in 1990. And so after serving there for some years, we decided to sell this company to Fearnley in Oslo. It was a shipbroking company. And I decided at that point that I didn't really want to stay with it because I had already been managing director of that company for 13 years. And I felt I was kind of past sell-by date. So TORM were happy with that. And they offered me a position to open a London office, which I did. And I started there in January 1997. And I managed to persuade them to invest in the offshore supply boat business, which at that time was at a fairly low level. And it turned out to be a very good move. And we did very well on it. But then when TORM changed, had new shareholders come in at around the year 2000, a strategic review, which ironically I undertook on behalf of the company, working with Andersen Consulting, as it was called at that time. It was decided that really the company needed to focus on product tankers, which was the core business, and to a lesser extent, dry bulk in a modest way. sort of 80-20 percentage-wise. So with a heavy heart, I set about selling the small fleet of anchor handling and supply vessels very profitably, I'm pleased to say. Although I did find out 4 years later that fleet again was sold for more than double. So at least I had the pleasure of knowing that we were on the right track. But in any event, I was then doing various sort of odds and sods jobs in TORM, and actually I was about to consider leaving them when, for a whole host of reasons, they decided to activate a Singapore office and transfer about a third of the fleet to Singapore. And that required a sort of a reasonably senior person to go there and take care of it. And so, of course, I put my hand up, and after 8 quite happy years working in London and Copenhagen, actually, I was spending about half that time in Copenhagen. After 8 years of that, I returned to Asia, Singapore, and set up TORM Singapore Private Limited in 2003. And then, unfortunately, and there were some golden years of really, the market was great between 03 and 07 into 8. And then, of course, we all know what happened. And TORM had got overextended somewhat, and I could sort of see the writing on the wall. So I managed to orchestrate my own termination, because I just I couldn't bear to be around to see what I feared would happen, and which unfortunately did happen. And so I was not there when it all went pear-shaped. But thankfully, moving on to today, the company is today controlled by Oaktree and is in good financial shape. And it's great to see it ongoing again, because it was more than 20 years of my life. So I have a very strong emotional attachment to TORM. But in any event, I worked on my own for a while. And then some people approached me and asked if I wanted to join a new startup, which is a commodity business backed by a very prominent Greek family. And so I said, sure, that would be great. And so in 2010, I started with this company doing, which is basic commodity trading. We just started it from scratch, three of us. And it's now grown. It's called Avra International. It's now grown to become quite a big company. But parallel to that, the same shareholders were also ship owners. And they had ordered 14 new building container ships, large ships in Korea with long-term charters. And I managed to persuade them to house that whole package in Singapore under Singapore flag. And I'm to this day, the ships were all delivered in 2014. And I was very involved in the financing and the setup of this little enterprise. And I'm still, involved with it today. I'm the sole director and sole signatory for those companies involved. And but as an aside, the family who controlled this company allowed me to also take some outside board memberships, of which I now have 5. And on top of that, I was in June 2015 elected president of the Singapore Shipping Association, which is quite a time-consuming job. And here I have to thank my shareholders for basically allowing me to do it, because without their support, it would be very, very difficult. And in parallel with that, I'm also one of 4 vice chairmen of the International Chamber of Shipping in London, on whose board I represent Singapore. And then I'm also on the board of the Maritime Port Authority of Singapore, which is in a way part of the job as being SSA, Singapore Shipping Association president. And that gives me, of course, a very interesting insight into how Maritime Singapore works. And it's a great thing, because Maritime Singapore is a success story. And with all due modesty, I'm very, very happy to be a small part of what I think is a big success story. And so that's where I am now. I've been in the industry on September 1st this year. I will have been in the industry for 45 years.
So why did you go sailing? I mean, why did you enter the ship the first time?
Well, I loved sailing as a sport. And my stepfather, who encouraged me greatly, said to me, I sailed with him. He was a great yachtsman, a very enthusiastic yachtsman, and he introduced me to it. And he always said to me, even when I was 12, 13 years old, you're natural with the sea and you have some business potential. And so you should be in shipping. And he basically guided me. And I never thought of anything else. And I feel very lucky that that he guided me as he did, because with that guidance and with that support and, going to sea as a 17-year-old, these are all things arranged by him through his contacts in the industry.
So he was in the industry?
He wasn't. He was a very, very successful consulting engineer for the pulp and paper business. He founded his own company, which became a world leader in that business, and he built mills all over the world. He was a very international person. He was Canada's first 1 million miler by air, which in the 50s was, quite something. And so he, I was always going to be in shipping, and he, as I say, encouraged me greatly and took a lot of interest in it over the years. And that's how I got into it.
Because usually either you are because of your family, or
Exactly.
you step on that famous banana leaf.
Exactly.
And you just...
The interesting thing is that I on my father's side, I come from a family of architects. They're all architects. In fact, my grandfather on my father's side was the architect of City Hall in Oslo. And my one brother is an architect, and most of my cousins were architects. But unfortunately, those skills did not, for whatever reason, come to me. I have zero skills in that area. But tracing my family history, my great-grandfather, who got an honorary knighthood from the British, Sir Esben Poulsson, after whom my own son is named, by the way, he founded the school P&I Club and was a ship owner in his own right. He got the knighthood from the British for services to the First War effort, whereby he offered his fleet to the disposal of the British. So there is, way back there was some shipping genes, but just, none in between.
So you didn't become a naval architect?
No,
that was not also...
I have just no talent for that whatsoever.
But you were a master mariner, or were you
No,
an
I
engineer?
wasn't. No, my extent of going to sea was as a mess boy on a German cargo ship called the Cap Finisterre, which is a little 9,000-tonner built in 1949. and we went down the west coast of the States, across to Tahiti, and then down to Australia and New Zealand, and where I got up and flew home. That's my only experience of being at sea, and I would have liked to have done more, but there my stepfather said, absolutely not, you're not going to do that, you're going to be in the business.
But are you sailing now? Sailing yachts?
Every weekend.
Yeah, I can
Every
understand
weekend,
that.
yeah. And I have a little boat in Singapore that I sail, and I have a small share in a classic yacht in England, which I sail whenever I can. So, I've done a lot of racing, particularly in my life. I sailed in the Admiral's Cup for Hong Kong 3 times in the late 70s and early 80s, and I did the race from Hong Kong to Manila 12 times, and called the China Sea race. I did the Sydney Hobart race in Australia, and I did the Fastnet race in England many times, Gotland once in Sweden a few times. So, I've sailed all my life and still do. And it's still my passion, that and skiing.
Okay, I see. Interesting, yeah. So you've been around for a while then in shipping, as you mentioned. What are the biggest changes that you have seen?
Well, I mean, we were talking in this conference about technology, and although I do predict the changes coming up now for the coming years is going to be way, way faster than those that preceded them. When I joined shipping, I mean, telex had only come in 2 or 3 years before that, to put it in context. Until then, it was cable. So I was in the early day of telex with, those are the tapes coming out. And then I remember we got the screens where you could edit. That was a major breakthrough, and so on it went. So I think the major change I've seen is really in communications area of the industry, satellite telephones, and, ships now have internet on board and all these things. This is a radical change from what it was. I mean, in those days, a ship would set off and, they would sort of get a noon position report by cable every few days, and that was your communication with the ship. So I think that area, it's really changed a lot. Ship design in some segments have changed. I mean, in LNG, LPG, there have been some breakthroughs, but in dry bulk, I would say the changes have been surprisingly limited. I mean, a Panamax bulk carrier when I started was 60,000 deadweight. Today it's 87,000 deadweight, but that's hardly a revolution. There's, of course, have been some natural evolutionary changes, but not as much in a way as you would expect. But I think there's more to come, and in things like ro-ros, car carriers, and so on. Specialized vessels, there's been some breakthrough. But overall, I would say the main changes is really in the information aspect of the industry, and the how much information that's available, how quickly everything is done. These days, charter parties, everything is done, electronically. I mean, this just saves a huge amount of time and hassle. Those are really the big changes. But otherwise, I mean, when I started in the Baltic Exchange, people were walking around handing out bits of paper with ship's position on it. Of course, that's long since gone. Today, the means of ship positions and so on is all, I did actually predict that the internet would replace the role of a broker. That was what I thought in the late 80s, early 90s, and that turned out to be completely incorrect. Thankfully, the human element... So far, the human element is still... So far, it's a fair point. The human element still seems to prevail, thank goodness.
Mm. So how do you see the future of shipping in general then?
Well, I think definitely, as we implied during this conference here, is that things like big data and so on is going to have really a major influence, and the connectivity between ship and shore and the measurements of performance, all these things will be just be faster, bigger, better. Quite how quickly we will be able to digest all the information that is available and put it to constructive use, how quickly that process will happen, I'm a bit unsure about. It may not be quite as quick as we think, but I'm very sure that certainly within 25 years from now, the industry will be unrecognizable.
Mm. So what about these autonomous ships, remote-controlled ships? What do you think about that?
I actually, they may come, but I think it's far off. I think it's, I was very happy to see the other day that one of these driverless cars had an accident, so I thought that's maybe that will delay us a little.
Well, we will be seeing them in the streets of Gothenburg soon. Volvo is putting up.
Is that right?
Yeah. And I understand that Volvo has now, the Volvo Trucks have now started a journey with 3 lorries going to Brussels from Gothenburg in a platooning way. Only a driver in the first one. Okay. So the 2 following lorries are just following the first one. It's interesting.
Well, I'm always happy my Scandinavians are always at the front end of innovation, right? But yeah, it's I wasn't aware of that. But I compared a little bit to, if you take LNG as a fuel, yes. In a bus service has A to B, where there's a terminal, for want of a better word, a gas station at each end. Certainly, it makes great sense. But the infrastructure is nowhere near there for worldwide trading in and out of ports. That's far off, in my opinion. But certainly for established routes, A to B, where it's all very predictable, sure, I can see it.
And I think when the SECA rules were introduced in Sweden or in the Scandinavian countries, everyone was complaining, of course, that it wasn't on a global basis.
Yes.
But I've seen so many innovations since then.
Absolutely. No, I think this is where, Europe, whenever you talk to European ship owners, they get a bit depressed about, the influence of Brussels and new rules, regulations, this and that. But there's no question that in terms of innovation, Europe is still where it's coming from for the shipping industry, largely.
Yeah. And EU is funding a bit of that.
Yes.
And the infrastructure for LNG, I think they are funding, trying to find. But I don't think every port should have one LNG terminal.
No, that would certainly be a while off. But, it's a viable alternative.
Yeah. We're often looked upon as the invisible industry.
I
so
agree.
How do we become more visible?
We become more visible, as I was saying in my talk today, by just a much better level of engagement between ship owners, charterers, stakeholders, associations, and governments. We just need to talk much better together in a much more organized way. And we need to, as someone was saying, stop hiding. There's no reason for our industry to hide because we have a fantastic track record in many ways and a lot to be proud of. But there is a sort of an inbuilt fear of, the bird covered in oil. This is the image of the greater public. Very often, that's how the greater public sees shipping, being completely unaware of its impact and its contribution to free trade and I still maintain free trade is a great thing for the world economy as a whole. I think the figures prove it. So, but we just need to be better, and I've heard this for all the 45 years I've been in the business. We need to be better at showing ourselves, articulating it, working with the regulators, showing our faces, and just being there. And I meet, in my capacity as vice chairman of ICS, I've met quite a number of ministers. And every time when you sit down for a one-to-one, if their time allows it, I'm just astonished at how little they know and understand about our business. And that's partly our own fault. And we must do better at that as an association. And I think in ICS, we're certainly trying, and Intertanker are doing a great job, Intercargo are doing a good job, BIMCO. Everybody's trying, and we in turn we have this round table where we try and put positions that we all agree on to governments, and we need to be much smarter the way we do it, and much more passionate about it. And I coming from the industry and I'm new to association work, and I was always a bit skeptical about it, frankly. But now I can see there really is a role to be done. But we, as the ship owners, those employed in the companies, the real practitioners, we're the ones who must step up and do it and help the associations.
I agree. Otherwise, it's just associations talking.
The owners need to be, as I say in ICS, I'm always urging every country, that we have 38 countries that are members of ICS, including, of course, Sweden. On those committees that we have, we need more practitioners and less, I don't want to say bureaucrats, but, less of the secretariat staff, the people engaged in the industry. But, of course, in a market particularly such as now, it's all hands to the pumps, and people are very stressed and very pressurized, and many owners are, fighting for survival. It's very hard to get the attention that we need, but we have to try. And I, for one, will try my very, very best.
I agree. And also it might have something to do that the politicians are changing.
Well, they come and go, exactly. I mean, in Singapore, we're just dead lucky because they don't change often, and they're very engaged with us. I meet the Minister of Transport once a month. Myself and one or two other people with total access.
Who do you think I should interview the next time? Who do you think would be interesting for people to listen to?
Peter Hinchcliffe, Secretary General of ICS, the guy I'm just about to meet.
Okay.
There are many. If you can get, there are many very interesting people. Andreas Soman-Pau, BW Group Chairman, fantastic guy. I'm just rattling off names at the top of my head. Michael Scow, Chief Executive of Hafnia Tankers in Copenhagen, is a very articulate person. Jan Renbo, CEO of Norden in Copenhagen.
This is good. I'm planning to go to Copenhagen soon.
Well, if you do, I can give you some names there.
Yeah,
because there are a lot of excellent shipping people there.
Thank you very much for taking the time.
Pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Is there a radio program about shipping in your home country? I hardly see any radio programs at all that are talking about shipping, and definitely not showcasing the people within the industry. I think this is an important part of building our brand as an industry, and that is what I'm doing through this podcast. However, I could use your help. You are the loyal listeners to the Shipping Podcast, and there are so many people that doesn't know anything about shipping. And they could all start by listening to the people who are working in the industry, who has already got the bug and the passion for what we are doing. So if you haven't signed up for the newsletter, go to the website shippingpodcast.com and do that. And once you have received the newsletter, it's due now, soon, then you can share the newsletter. I realize that it might be hard to try and explain what a podcast is to people who doesn't know. But you can always forward a newsletter to people you think would be interested in helping to build the brand of shipping and to understand more and find out what it's all about. I get so many contacts from people outside shipping nowadays. It's young people, it's people who've got an idea for business, it's politicians, it's everyone but the people I know in shipping. And that is a lot of people that I do know. So please help me spread the word. It's important. Soon we have had 40,000 downloads. People have listened to every episode. And it's approximately 100 people listening every day. We can do this. We can spread the word about shipping to more people and get them to understand why we are so passionate about the shipping industry. Thank you for listening to the Shipping Podcast. Don't forget to tell everyone that you meet that there is a shipping podcast where the maritime professionals are talking about their everyday job.